Thank you, Sango. And I want to extend a very warm welcome to this plenary on what you can see from the way I'm dressed is a very cold day in Delhi. I'm freezing, but it's very nice to see that technology and digitization unite our two presenters today. One who's across the 7 seas, as they say, and another one who's in our own part of the world. So for Dr. T. Shanmuga Priya, it's a very ungodly hour to be presenting, while for our other presenter of this plenary, which is Samya Brata Roy, it's a godly hour. So a warm welcome to you. And it's my pleasure to introduce our two young presenters today. Dr. Priya first, just to quickly introduce her to all those who are listening in. She is currently a digital humanities postdoctoral scholar at the Department of Historical and Cultural Studies, the HCS, at the University of Toronto, Canada. She holds a degree in digital humanities, which is the focus of our event, and also Indian English literature from the Indian Institute of Technology in Indore, which is a city in Madhya Pradesh in central India. She's been an AHRC postdoctoral research associate and a Spark Fellow at Lancaster University in the United Kingdom. As an academic, her area of engagement has been digital humanities that includes interdisciplinary facets, its environmental outreach, and also digital literature and games. And of particular consequence to her is a very interesting area, which is developing and applying digital tools and technologies for humanities research, which is what we are all students of. So in keeping with her academic focus, Priya teaches courses entitled Games and Play, and another paper, Reading and Unreading, Digital Born Creative Works, Critical Making of Contemporary Information. Apart from these two papers, she also offers digital humanities workshops and research consultation for faculty and researchers at Toronto. Interestingly, she's also a digital artist, and she has collaborated with digital artist, another fellow academic, if I may say, and a person in her area, Andy Campbell, and they have developed digital poetry and digital game projects. So that's the first speaker. The second one who will be presenting today is Samya Brata Roy. He's on his way to becoming a doctor, being registered at Indian Institute of Technologies, Jodhpur Department of Humanities and Social Sciences, which happens to be in the city of Jodhpur, Rajasthan, a state in India. His area of academic engagement relates to literary studies, digital humanities, remediation, pedagogy, and promoting access via networks. Jamia Brata has been a hashtag scholar, hashtag standing for Humanities, Arts, Science, and Technology Alliance and Collaboratory. He's been a founding member of Electronic Literature India, so it shows he has a creative side. And this particular forum focuses on electronic literature by Indian authors. In keeping with his academic inclinations, Samya Brata also fills in as a technical advisory member with Humanities Commons. He serves as the facilitator for Digital Objects and Media, Special Interest Group with Digital Humanities Alliance for Research and Teaching Innovations, very interesting field. He's also a transcriber for the Canterbury Tales project, which gets me thinking because I teach the prologue to the Canterbury Tales at Jamia. And he also serves as a liaison with the Association for Computers and the Humanities. Since the last 5 years, Samya Brata has had his compositions appearing on the penarchis.wordpress.com. So welcome both of you, and it is very heartening to see that we have young presenters today who are going to be presenting for all those who are listening in. I have a small request to make, and that is I request both the presenters today, which is Priya and Samya Brata, to try and stick to 35 minutes, because I think I've taken 5 minutes in giving the introduction. And after 35 each, which will leave us around 80 minutes, we'll have maybe 10 minutes for a question answer session before I sum up this particular plenary session. So I'm going to invite, first of all, Dr. T. Shanmuga Priya to please give her presentation, and welcome to all our listening in friends and colleagues. So Priya, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Amina. That is nice introduction. Okay, so I'm going to share my screen. I will definitely try to stick with the time, and also please bear with me. It's really oddly over an hour, so I may like sometimes miss some words, or like I may blabber also something. Please, so just bear with me. I hope you all can see my screen.
Yes, we can see you.
Yes, we can see.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for the invitation. I would like to thank you first, Shimli Moni Dodi, for the invitation. And it's really honored to be part of this conference on electronic literature. Without any further ado, I will start my presentation and will talk immediately. What I'm going to talk today is about the primarily past and present condition of Indian electronic literature. So before moving to my talk, I would like to briefly step back and say a few words about myself, how I got interested in electronic literature. So during 2014, when I was studying for my master's at Bardar University, Coimbatore, I heard the first time about digital humanities. I was more into Adobe Flash, Adobe Photoshop, Adobe Premiere, all those multimedia software. Then I was just curious. There must be something like even if digital humanities involve some of the technologies for research, which means of course there must be something going on about the creative works. That's how I got curious. Then I started exploring, and then I stumbled upon some of the websites like I Love E-Poetry by Leonard Flores. Then that's how I started my interest in electronic literature. Then I did a small thesis on digital poetry, particularly American digital poetry, for my master's program. And then when I joined for my PhD in 2015 at IIT Indore, then I was more curious to continue my research on Indian electronic literature. Then I realized there is no something existing like Indian electronic literature. After a year of research and struggles, and I found a few works that something I can call as like Indian electronic literature. And then I did some preliminary research. I presented in one of the conferences in India, but actually I didn't receive not even like one single comment. But as a early career researcher, I just started my PhD. There was something I felt like maybe what I'm doing is wrong or right, and I was like little lost and confused. And then I did more, like I did continue, but that didn't stop me. But then I came across Electronic Literature Organization conducts every year conference on electronic literature. Then I presented the same paper in Porto in 2017. Actually, that conference opened up many windows for me. I met many experts in my area, and also I met my friend and my friend and colleague and digital artist Andy Campbell, with whom I'm still working. So with that, I actually started writing more about electronic literature in general, and particularly about Indian electronic literature. So in 2017, when I was writing my first paper on Indian electronic literature, meantime, Sovic Mukherjee's No Country for Elite work also got published. That was something really wonderful because I was not like finding something relevant to the Indian context. So Sovic's work gave me some kind of motivation to further go on. And then with that, I took as a reference, I took his work as a reference for my work. And then I started producing continuously works on Indian electronic literature and also electronic literature. Then I was also awarded Electronic Literature Organization Fellow in 2022. So during 2015, when I started my research, so ELO had published 2 volumes by the time, and then in 2016 they published volume 3rd also. But I just went through all those volumes and I found that there are many artists and writers from different part of countries, and even for the 3rd volume, the works like compared to the previous volumes, large number of works got published from 26 countries and even 13 languages. And for even Asia, countries like Japan, South Korea, and China also participated, but India was not nearly there. So with that, I started my question like, does something like electronic literature even existing in India? But if you look at the technologies and digital, like even like internet, mobile, social media that we use in India compared to other countries, it's like quite large in terms of data, because we are in, of course we are a lot of people. So and also, if you look at the literary tradition, if you go back to historicity of Indian literary practice, even Sovic actually pointed out some of the ancient literary practices in India. For example, Kavat Tashna, that oral storytelling in Rajasthan, that they use painted boxes for each story that opens up different narratives. So, and other few examples that I can provide is like palm leaf manuscripts and Patachitra. All those works also use some of the creative methods like images along with the text. One more example, 2 more example I can think of are like Ragamala paintings, which also has series of creative elements like classical music, poetry, and art. The other one more, the last one, Chitrakavi, it's a pictorial poem. So here, artists use graphics with poetical lines. So all those, in literary practices in our ancient periods, and tell that like using novel materials or intact elements, those are something certainly not a new phenomenon in Indian literary tradition. However, when it comes to electronic literature, there must be, I actually strongly believe there must be something really existing, but it's a matter of trying to find them out. And also the other reason that why we couldn't find them, because they are not labeled or tagged as electronic literature. They just spread around. We have to dig it out. So electronic literature is something like already started emerged through some of the creative works in the digital space without any knowledge of Western electronic literature. That is the first I found was SMS novel. So digital communication technologies were used first to produce electronic literature. SMS is something like short message service. It's a future used for communication, but actually that also brought transformation in their literary tradition. It's not only just brought the transformation, but also decentralized the notion of creativity, because it provides space for collaborative writing and different embodiment of languages and various use of space and diverse critical analysis. The first SMS novel is Clockroom, published in 2004 by Rogu, published by 3825 Media and supported by SMS Junction. So this SMS novel has 16 chapters and 2 micro chapters that were everything transformed through SMS every day. So this process actually stopped in 16th chapter. It just ended abruptly, and the chapters are properly archived online. So the author actually in his blog mentioned that, I'm sorry, it's her, that's something still I couldn't find out, could be anonymous name, or if someone already knows about this writer, could you please put it in the chat box. The author mentioned on her this block that until chapter 16 will be called round one of the game. Clock room 2 will begin in the early part of 2006. And but the clock room 7 has not yet been published. So when we look at this SMS novel, we can definitely associate with the concepts of electronic literature, because it also uses many, that technological elements that take part in the production of SMS novel, because the text actually solely engages with the material form of mobile technology, because this gives only limited space for like publishing text, because only 200 characters one can write by using SMS. And also it comes with, so since the writer cannot use many words or sentences, he or she needs to find a way to reduce the length of the sentence or words. So that's where it is called SMS language. Like for example, there are like some of the emotions we can use just simples. For example, sad, unhappy, laughing. So all these features that are something go with the phrase coined by Catherine Hell. It's because it's a hybrid in nature. Yeah, of course, it's hybrid in nature because it's just, it's a matter of mixed concepts from both technology and from both literature. If we closely look at the Clockroom archive, so we can see, as I mentioned earlier, it's also provided space for collaborative writing. Because it's the author of Clockroom also invited his or her readers to take part in the narrative or like the production of novel. For example, he or she set some of the rules for the reader, that they can predict the character uh, for the next chapter. Like they should keep landing the main character in something like trouble or making illogical move, which is not okay. Let me read out the rule. So the rules one, you get points for helping Rita, a negative score for landing her in trouble or making an illogical move, which is not consistent with the past chapter. For billion moves, you get a round win. Rule number 2, the rules will evolve as the game grows bigger. Rule number 3, currently the common threshold for, sorry, that's not true, I guess. Currently the common threshold for new chapter is 7 comments. So this is something very new for the literature, because there in the traditional literature there won't be a space for the conversation between the reader and writer, but here the SMS novel provided a space for combination between both reader and writer. And after SMS, the first SMS novel, there are a few more SMS novels also published. The other one is Death Heaven, was written by National Award-winning writer Pinky Virani. It was also published as an audio mobile book. And then there are a few more. ABS Nivas The Revenge. These two I couldn't find online. But Pia Harikumar's Nila Kannukal, written in Malayalam, that is something available to download on the website. Apart from SMS novels, in 2000, in the early period of 2000, internet, smartphone, all those new technologies were introduced. They actually changed even the communication between people. So, according to the Pew Research Center survey, 65% of internet users in India said they use social networking sites such as Facebook or Twitter, while 55% have used the internet to look for or apply for a job. So social media is something, because of the smartphone movement in India, social media is widely used for like something creative writing. So it is also called micronarrative by Jenkins. If you look at the literary elements of social media narrative, like SMS novel, it also takes the the materiality of the smartphone or even like internet or other web technologies. For example, it should be brevity because there won't be much space again, like SMS novel. But unlike SMS novel, it provides other opportunities like we can add like kinetic images, kinetic animations, videos, and in SMS novel we can't produce anything non-linear, but in Facebook or Twitter that you can use it for non-linear narrative. Of course, you can also add sounds to that. So there are many examples, we can just find them. But compared to SMS novels, social media literature have millions of writers, at the same time millions of readers, millions of followers. There are many social media literature we can find, and for example, the particular one is the Terribly Tiny Tales. Actually, what they did, they are quite famous, and what they did, they actually published two books, or one book for sure, but the other book was on the process when I was doing my research. So they published even the collected narratives from the Facebook that they were posting every day in a book form. So there are many other social media pages also. Every day they're like producing some kind of creative works. With that, there are other types of social media works such as like Twitter fiction, Instagram poetry. Synthesis Rhythm's work is quite famous among that. And there are many apps and slam poetry in YouTube that's something like we just easily come across. Okay, so all these work, the previous whatever I mentioned so far, none of the works are tagged or labeled as Indian electronic literature. So, but this scenario started changing last year, 2020, sorry, last year, 2021. So when Draft, the organization participated in the electronic literature organization conference, they actually curated some of the electronic literature that they also tagged as Indian electronic literature. So it's also available online. They actually we can they put it in the Google Sheets with the links, proper links. So these are really important and amazing works. Creation of Birds by Puneet and Sultana, Radio Vector by Agat Anuska, Supercut Padma by Anuska, Playground of Text Likla, Storehouse A by Catherine and Steffi, Rallying the Web for Poetry by Turnima Deni, The Good Citizen by Pankui. So it's really important to shout out to them. So apart from the draft curation, in ELC4, Electronic Literature Organization also published the fourth volume of Electronic Literature collection last year, just a few months ago. In that, as I mentioned in the beginning, we couldn't find any work for in the 3 volumes continuously, but in the 4th volume, we could see 4 works in the category of identity, Indian identity. 3 from India, one is by Indian from UK. So these works are also really an important intervention in Indian electronic literature because these works are officially tagged as Indian electronic literature. So that's why we were looking for it. So that's something very important. So when we look at the historicizing electronic literature, Catherine Hales, Leander Flores, Funkhauser, they all like historicized electronic literature for the Western context. For example, pre-web electronic literature as first generation. Those works are published from 1950 to 1995. Some of the work like hypertext, hypertext, kinetic, and text-based. The second generation after web introduction, and then third generation after the social media introduction. So, but we cannot use the same kind of historization to Indian electronic literature because it's actually vice versa for Indian context. The origin of Indian electronic literature is different from the means of Western electronic literature. First of all, the period of origin and the growth are varied between these literary digital realms. The origin of materials also dissimilar because for Indian electronic literature started with SMS novel, but for Western electronic literature, it started from computer, but it's like likely vice versa. So for them, third generation is like something digital communication technology. But for Indian context, it's something started from digital communication technology. So in that case, if we also historicize the Indian electronic literature, so I would go with SMS novel as first generation, because Clockroom recently marked the birth of Indian electronics in 2004, and few more novels also published till 2009, till the birth of social media. And like SMS novels are actually text driven, and it allows reader to take part in developing the story. And it was not dependent on the computer or internet. It was mainly circulated through the service of SMS, which relied on phone service companies. So we can call this short period between 2004 and 9 as the first generation of Indian electronic literature. Like a handful of newspaper articles published about this SMS novel, but one or two research papers only we could find about SMS novels. So we can say that first generation of electronic literature failed to create a substantial stakeholders of researchers and readers and also creators, because we could see only a few SMS novels. Maybe there might be a few more, or like, because since we couldn't find it, we cannot just jump into the conclusion. But that something we can make. We are sure that we couldn't find many online, so it didn't create a substantial stakeholders or creators as well. Second generation Indian electronic literature, that something starts with the social media introduction and the smartphone movement from 2009 onwards. So social media networks such as Facebook, Twitter, Instagram are launched after 2005 in India, but actually it received much attention towards end of 2010. So this intervention brought transformation in the production, consumption, and circulation of the electronic literature. Um, Unlike the first generation, second generation has many literary elements, I mean, digital literary elements like hypertext, video clips, graphics, and kinetics. It also provides not only space for readers and writers combination, but also space for critical views, like through comment section. Um, so it also provides space for collaboration between other writers as well, and it actually produces massive amateur writers, because there is something like you cannot just pinpoint one writer or like a few writers as really a example of social media writers, because there are many writers coming up every other day, and at the same time massive readers as well. So these electronic literary works publishing from post 2009 to present belong to second wave Indian electronic literature. The second wave received mainstream attention of public, and again, not so much from the research firms. So usually in my research, I concluded as unlike Western electronic literature, Indian electronic literature has only two generations, but something that I'm questioning even now, because by looking at the some of the last year and this year, the progress and production of Indian electronic literature actually needs us to redefine whatever we concluded earlier. Because the recent label Indian electronic literary works are introducing third wave. I mean, it's potential. There is potential for in third wave of Indian electronic literature, because um, because these works are created through advanced technologies such as Python, HTML, JavaScript, and other software. So it needs definitely a depth research before calling them as third generation, but um, I feel that we can definitely call them as a third generation, because if we compared with other generations of electronic literature, these are highly technical, highly advanced in terms of both creative and also technology wise. Of course, we also have many challenges, because like the production is not so much like, and also only few works are tagged so far. Only a number of works are tagged so far. So what are the challenges that we have that actually prevented the production of electronic literature? So the challenges are, first of all, insufficient advanced computer literacy to arts and humanities students and scholars. At the same time, insufficient arts and humanities literacy to computer science and students and scholars. The third challenge is something very important because Indian electronic literature is not monetized unlike Western electronic literature. Even since I'm working with digital artists, I can understand the economic value behind the electronic literary works. If you compare traditional literature with electronic literature, so it's actually the challenge is same because you cannot just you overnight you can't become famous in traditional literary writing as well. But still, there is no platform for artists to submit their work and publish, get monetized. There is no such platform existing in India. So maybe few scholars or few artists, those who depend on those who rely on other things for their economic, for monetizing some other works, so they can just produce. They are producing electronic literature. But if you're an artist that you are solely depending on your artistic work, uh, that's something definitely you don't get money out of it. So maybe this could be one of the challenges. That's why maybe we couldn't see much work on electronic literature in India. Also, we need to have we have and actually we don't have any archive or database, or even we don't have festivals or something like going on about digital related literature. So these are the challenges I would point out. Mm, besides these, like Indian electronic literature and challenges, everything, I would also call for the intersection of digital humanities and electronic literature, because digital humanities is something like it's somehow established in India. So this is the right time to if we combine both of them together. So we could get really productive works in terms of both digital humanities and electronic literature, because digital humanities also use creative methods for like creative methods of digital technologies to study humanities related work. Electronic literature also use digital technologies for creative productions. So the combination of two would be really enhance each other. Whenever I think about intersection of digital humanities and electronic literature, I would definitely remember about. I'm sorry. I would definitely remember about the Vendraps in the Vendraps R.K. Narayan's Vendraps Waits. There are two characters, Mali and Jagan. Mali actually wants to become a writer, and by using a prototype computer, that Jagan is like something upset about it. So this, according to Mali, this machine has some type of patterns. The type of patterns are like kind of emotions. So the writer not just needs to touch the buttons, and then that machine will create the story. So it won't just only create the story, it also produces like text analysis. That is something like one of the important features of digital humanities. So this is combination of both creative and at the same time analyzing, like critical analysis. So I'm just using this concept for combining digital humanities and electronic literature. So recently, for my postdoc work, I created a digital poetry based on the outcome from my research about climate change and water issues in Coimbatore. I also faced many challenges. This took nearly more than a year to create this work. In the beginning, I didn't realize much about the challenges, but because I thought I'm just using open access resource. But even when you do animation, even just making the animation, it took just 1 or 2 months. Just run the animation, make the animation, then see if there is any issue or any error, then you have to take it away. So there are many challenges that actually come up with the package of electronic literature. Um, I'm also working with Andy Campbell in terms of other creative work. One work we completed that's called it the Water Cave, the Kuhai. The two more works I'm working with for two more works. The last process, hopefully we'll be releasing it soon. The other one is it's a game about again environmental issues.
Yes, please.
Yeah, that's it. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Carry on, finish in 5 minutes.
Sorry, did you mean me?
Yeah, I said, can you wrap it up in 5 minutes?
Amina ma'am, she has finished her presentation just now. I think maybe most probably there was some kind of a break in your network.
No, because she's still speaking while I am requesting.
Yeah, there was a break. She said thank you and then it's over. She has finished her presentation.
I missed out there.
Yes, just the last year.
Okay, so are you finished, Priya?
Yeah, I finished. I was just about to reach the thank you slide and then you just
Okay.
yeah.
Okay. So thank you. And we'll go on to Shamya Brata Roy and take the questions after he's finished. So Shamya Brata, please, the floor is now yours. And once again, thank you to Priya.
Okay, thank you so much. I will be sharing my screen now. I'll just be sharing a tab, but later on, I will be sharing other stuff as well because of the hyperlinks. So then I will have to reshare the screen again. So can you see my slides as of yet? Can you hear me? Can you see?
Yeah, it's loading. Now it's there.
Okay. Okay, now it's there. So you
Yeah.
Cannot see it.
Can you see it now?
No, I can't.
Okay. Then I will start it again. Just give me another moment.
Samya, I think I can see it.
Yeah, I can see.
Yeah.
Okay. Just give me another moment.
Here come. Yeah, I can see it now. Thank you.
Okay, all right. Okay, so as you can see that I have titled this as Accessibility and Electronic Literature. So I will try to focus on some of the elements that concerns me regarding access, because whenever we are talking about electronic literature or the digital or anything pertaining to the digital for that matter, we have a kind of a simplistic attitude of assuming that everything is freely available everywhere, and there may or may not be certain impediments, as is usually the case in the counterpart of the digital, which is oft termed as analog. So I will be trying to hint at this question of accessibility and certain politics regarding accessibility from my own experience, and I will be outlining very carefully what the limitations of my study and my experience has been, because I don't mean to make any broad stroke claims for that matter. So first things first, I'll be talking about epistemics. So how did I come to this understanding that yes, accessibility needs attention? So it started with a call from the Electronic Literature Lab. Professor Dini Grigar was here when Margie Lucy-Brink was speaking, of course. And this is, of course, a lab which is headed by her. And I saw a call to work for restoring old pieces of electronic literature. And I remember I had some time in my hands and I wanted to try it out. I thought that what more could it be that I had to perhaps test some of the electronic literature out, maybe write some information for the metadata and create some entries, and that would be all. But then I came to know about this thing called Conifer. Now, what is Conifer? Conifer is a simulation kind of a thing, because I'm not using technical terms because I'm not very comfortable with them. Now, what Conifer does is, for example, if an obsolete piece of an digital or an electronic artifact is housed in one particular system which has the capability to run that artifact. For example, that is there in a server in Washington State, where Professor Grigar is located, for example. What Conifer will do is basically it will simulate that environment so that you sitting in front of your desktop anywhere in the world can access that simulation. So you are not accessing the text proper, you're accessing a simulation of the text which is accessing the text. I did expect there will be roadblocks, but I did not expect this amount of delay. What happened was when I tried to access these pieces of artifact or these electronic texts for that matter, I experienced a severe lag of about 30 seconds between me, let's say, pointing at a mouse and getting a response. That was a huge challenge. Now, that is one part of where I am coming from, the conversations of access, because my inability to work with it due to infrastructural conditions, combined with discussions that has happened on accessibility in electronic literature, primarily from ELO, which is the Electronic Literature Organization, and its adjacent journal called Electronic Book Review. I wanted to see, number one, what conversations have happened in this domain, and then see if my experience can be inserted within this. And then it again got amplified by my experience of reviewing/reading this particular book, The Digital Imaginary by Roderick Coover. So this will be my argument. I will be using my experience of reading this book, The Digital Imaginary, as a case study to comment on the politics of access in electronic literature. Now, I understand that most of us are getting attuned to the discourse of electronic literature per se. So I acknowledge that there might be some things that may sound theoretically a bit dense, and I acknowledge that fact. I will try to make it as accessible as I can, ironically speaking, considering the title of my talk. But I am always open for conversations later on. Let's move on. So, the literature review, as we call it. Why am I just focusing on Electronic Literature Organization or the Electronic Book Review, which is the journal for the Electronic Literature Organization, one of the affiliated journals of the electronic literature, the dedicated journal, whatever you want to call it. Now, the Electronic Book Review happens to be one of the earliest fully online journals available, right? So it makes it very interesting because it has been at the forefront of the conversations that has been happening in and around the electronic literature organizations. You can access it, it's fully open access. Now, in 2012, Vera Van Dyck wrote an article called In Defense of Meaning, where the person is referring to two political stances. Maria Goicoechea de Jorge, who teaches in Madrid, identifies these two aspects of the technophile and the techno-skeptic. People like Noah Wardrip-Fruin, who is a very important scholar, would consider the goal of reading digital literature to develop computational literacy. But techno-skeptics like Goicoechea would rather look at digital literature to bridge the divide between media and literary theory. Make that of what you will. Then comes Serge Bouchardon's article in 2018 called Towards Gestural Specificity in Digital Literature, where he extends Espen Arset's idea of non-triviality. What does non-triviality mean? Let me just build on it a little bit more. When he uses the word non-triviality, he of course uses it in his seminal work on ergodic literature. He uses it to explain video games, most important contextualization that is important here, right? He uses the ergodic to include the aspect of semiotic manipulation while considering an interactive digital text, is what Bouchardon says. But Arset says that when we are reading a book, we are going from one direction to the other, moving our eyeballs, stopping somewhere, and probably turning the page. That is the act of reading a print codex, to be specific. But when we are looking at a digital text, we are probably typing on our keyboards, moving our mouse pointer here and there, making some clicks, etc., etc., etc. Now, these other movements, if I am to put it very bluntly, can be clubbed in as an understanding of non-triviality. Bouchardon adds the aspect of semiotic manipulation because the digital also brings in the element of the multimodal, which means that there can be images, videos, musics, etc., etc. So it's a mishmash of signifiers, if you understand what I mean. So when we talk about access, these can also be hindrances to access as well, because infrastructures and conditions can either allow these to happen or hinder these to happen. There are a lot of conversations here at play. Finally, Kozak's article on electronic literature, experimentalism beyond the great divide, of course, the global south and the global north, highlights the complex nature of materialities and geopolitics that get hidden in the discourse of digital culture. That's what I was starting off with. The utopic idea of flattening of the digital, where everything is accessible to everyone, is a myth, and we have to acknowledge that. Moving on, Ryan Ikeda uses the ELMSIP database to talk about excavating logics of white supremacy in electronic literature, where he uses the keyword search to point out certain biases and mentions that it is very important that we do not overlook them and flag the issues, which is once again very important. Finally, as I am building towards my field setting and then the research gap, as you will, once again, Claudia Kozak, experimental electronic literature from the Souths, talking about the Latinx context, identifies the necessity of writing and publishing in a non-native language. Multilinguality, very important consideration when talking about electronic literatures in India. And I use the term electronic literatures plural, being very, very conscious of the politics at play. Being updated in terms of local/regional bibliography, and the lack of access of academic content in majority worlds as major conversations to be had before making things global. We can't just aspire to make things global with an utopic attitude of flatness at play. First things first is to acknowledge the inequalities. Now, these are certain access or in-access conversations that has been having pertaining to politics of getting close to material. Hannah Ackermans, who recently finished her thesis defense from the University of Bergen, works on disability and electronic literature. And this particular article talks about better with sound on, the singularity of reading and writing under constraint. Raises the issue of making Elit works accessible to persons with disabilities. It's a very important consideration to make. However, Dina Larson, who herself is a vocal activist when it comes to disability and electronic literature, she responds to that paper full of admiration, saying that universal design cannot allow everyone to have the same experiences. Recently, this has been a raging debate in game studies as well, because games like Elden Ring are so difficult to play. There has been an argument that why is there not an easy mode? There are people who say that accessibility has to be kept in mind, but there is another group who says, if you are not good enough, don't play the game. What is your take is up to you. More often than not, these has been the conversations in and around ELO and EBR about access in different forms. But I have a very fundamental question in response to these conversations, something that I believe needs a little bit more attention. Here I borrow from Scott Redberg's 2006 article on Wherefore Genre, which is a fascinating article. I implore you to look into it. However, if you need access to any of these articles, please let me know. I'm more than happy to provide you with all the resources. Mentions that in studying electronic literature, a great deal of time and effort is required simply to learn to traverse the text. Traverse, once again, is a term, I shouldn't say loosely, but borrowed from Arset, the non-trivial traversal of the text, right? That in order to learn how to go about the text, how to learn the text, for example, you're reading a book and someone tells you that page number 357 is hidden under a cupboard. And someone tells you, okay, you will find the bibliography behind a desk in another room. Imagine that kind of an effort. Of course, not the physical bit, but the traversal problems of it. And think about reading every new electronic literature text, e-lit text, e-text, whatever you want to call it, with a different mechanism at play. So a great deal of time and effort goes into understanding the mechanics of how do we go about the text before we go into literary aesthetics and all that stuff that we like to do. Now, before even going to the question that how much time do we invest, the fundamental question that has to be asked is, what happens before that? My fundamental question surrounds here the politics of reaching the text in the first place. Can we actually access the text? Can we reach the text? Can you get to the text? Is the first question. Now, my answer to this, or my kind of response to this, builds on my case study of reading this particular book, which I find fascinating. This is a Digital Imaginary Literature and the Cinema of the Database by Roderick Coover. And my experience of reading it. Of course, initially, I remember I set out with the idea of reviewing this book for EBR. But then I decided that, and with the good advice, of course, to develop a full paper on it. Now, because of reasons many and pertaining to time as well, I will not, of course, go into my entire paper because I have to talk about other issues as well. But I'll give you hints of how a book references texts and has conversations about the text. But when you go and look into the text, you cannot read them. Then how do you do the conversations about the text? It's very interesting how it pans out. The book has a very interesting structure. It is divided into 3 or 4 parts with several thematic discussions going over with it, right? Now, these 3 parts first feature interviews with the creators about the text. And after the interviews, there are commentaries about the interviews about the text. And then at the last section, there is meta commentaries about the interviews about the text. So it's like peeling layers of onions. But if you cannot access the text, it's like slipping through a rabbit hole infinitely, reaching nowhere. I am constantly reading about something, but I don't know what I am reading about. It's very fascinating. So the first part is one of database. And this is by Sharon Daniels, Inside the Distance. Just give me a moment. There is some noise coming. I need to check where it's coming from. Just give me one. Sorry for the disruption. So I will be restarting my screen share. Just give me a moment, because there are certain things that I would like to show. So when I open the other tab, can you please tell me if the other tab is visible?
Yes, it is showing.
It is showing, right? Thank you so much. So this is part 1, which is titled The Database. And this is Sharon Daniels, Inside the Distance. Now, if we go to this, just give me a moment, I'll move this one down. This is Sharon Daniels, Inside the Distance. Now, this is like a film, documents the victim-offender mediation processes in Belgium and shows how mediation poses a potential cultural alternative to dominant modes and methods. It's a web documentary installation with multiple outcomes, where they have actually hired a group of actors and they give you options to look at various possibilities of interrogation. Now, this is one type of, let's say, an interactive text where you can choose what scenario is going to play out. You have these many dialogue options. He said, she said, and these, and then you go around with it and then you choose a different scenario. The first thing that I came across when I got introduced to this is that, wow, this is like a full-fledged film that they have shot, hiring actors, getting them to do lines all over again, and with so many themes at play that you can literally play around with. But if you do not have a very high-speed internet connection, your experience of going through the text will not be as smooth as someone else's. That is an impediment. Now, I will not be talking about all the chapters in the book. Of course, I cannot. There are many texts which, when you try to access, they're available in open access, right? You cannot just access them. But that is like a repeated pattern, which I won't delve too much into it because it will seem like I'm talking about the same thing over and over again. Now, this is number one particular type of text. Moving on is that when you have one particular text with a lot of features, with a lot of options. It reminded me of Bandersnatch and how pirating Bandersnatch when it came out was very difficult because you couldn't enjoy the possibilities that was given by the choices, because you couldn't make those choices, because it was flattened into a linear narrative. Because many people did not have the Netflix subscriptions and they wanted to get it from some illegal source. It simply did not catch on. Even the people who watched Bandersnatch in Netflix did not like it, but that's a different conversation. So it's not just important that you give people choice of interaction, but also understand that the infrastructures of supporting interaction perhaps will not be accessible to people everywhere. And that is a very important consideration to make. Moving on, someone has already mentioned Pry this morning, and I was very glad. The Pry by Danny Canizaro is a very fascinating text, but once again, it's only available for iOS. And even then, it's a paid app. But films are always not free. Video games and books are always not free. So why should we expect electronic literature and digital art, digital literature to be free? It's unfair to do that. So Pry is also another multimedia immersive experience which also has the text at the center of it. And the name is Pry. And when you kind of look into the whole experience of the text, you can actually move your fingers to pry through the text. I'm sorry I can't show you because of paucity of time, but please feel free to explore. I believe you can see the links and the names over here. Once again, moving ahead. Now, this is something that fascinates me the most. Part 3, multimodality. Letter to an Unknown Soldier, created by Kate Pullinger and Neil Bartlett. Now, this was a memorial kind of a thing that was created on the 100th anniversary of World War I, the Sarajevo assassinations. What is very interesting to me here is that this is a project funded by the national government, with the Prime Minister taking part in it as well. So when we think about opportunities of monetizing electronic literature, as Dr. Shanmuga Priya very rightly pointed out, it cannot happen unless there are initiatives that receives governmental support and funding. And we must aspire towards that. But I remember in these conferences as well that even people like us, we talk about how PDFs cannot be electronic literature. How digitizing a book cannot be electronic literature. Let me offer you an alternate perspective. You see that this is a very fascinating, swanky website with high resolution images, and where you have a beautiful website with the declaration of war and everything here. But when you move to actually read the letters, what are these letters? These letters are digitized versions of handwritten pages, which is surrounded by a host of multimedia environment. But if you go to the core of it, it's just a PDF. Hence my question, and I will resume sharing my entire screen again. And then my question is, it seems that as soon as the creating technology becomes normalized, the work is no longer elite. This is something that Mark Marino says. Mark teaches in the University of Southern California. So as soon as a technology becomes normalized, it's no longer elite. Perhaps it is because of the mundaneness of digitizing a PDF that unless and until you cover it up with layers of multimedia website design, UX, UI, it does not become electronic literature. But that doesn't mean that a simple normal, I'm not making a case that a PDF is electronic literature. No. But I'm saying how it can be made to seem as electronic literature via infrastructural jugglery. And then I come to my fundamental question about the digital imaginary by Roderick Coover, is of the text as a vortex. Now, as I mentioned about the structure of the book, that the Elit artifact is at the absolute bottom, followed by interviews with the creators with Roderick Coover. Roderick Coover is taking interviews of the creators of these artifacts, which is followed by commentaries on the artifact by other critical thinkers, which is followed by meta commentaries about the commentaries. So once again, you see layers after layers after layers. But what if you can't access the Elit artifact in itself? Then does it become like an endless vortex where you are spinning with nowhere to go? What does it become? I wonder. Then finally, in order to talk about Elit and overcome access barriers, now this is where I shift from my understanding of just the digital imaginary to talk about certain other issues regarding Elit. Please pardon the disjunctured nature of my talk. We have to not just read but write Elit. I really agreed with what Dr. Siddhartha Chakraborty said in his plenary last day. And also today morning, I was having a conversation with Dr. Shouvik Mukherjee, who said that it's not just important to read and write Elit, but also to archive Elit. And I will come to that question in a bit. So this one, freefallfuture.text, curated by Draft at ELO 2021, which Dr. Shanmuga Priya incidentally showed just right now, the text by Pankhuri and the Good Citizen, etc., etc. Now, this one exists, but once again, it's an archive. But is it an archive? Why? Why am I challenging the things that I just said? Because it exists as an Excel sheet. And I have seen people question, can an Excel sheet be an archive? I leave you to ponder on that question. Can an Excel sheet be an archive? It's your call. We can have more discussions on it. But then there are other places to access Elit, like the next. Professor Dini Grigar was here when Margie Luzebrink was speaking. And she once again heads the ELO's The Next, which is headed at Washington State University. And she has a beautiful lab. I request all of you to please go and check out the website. They work on restoring old pieces of electronic literature. And finally, Dr. Shanmuga Priya once again mentioned, this is a screenshot from ELC4, Electronic Literature Collection, 4th edition. And you can see Megha Dutam, she also mentioned that. So these are the resources where you can access electronic literature. Of course, there are many more. I mentioned Dina Larson very briefly. She has a website where she shares tools of creating electronic literature. So we can't just stop ourselves at reading electronic literature, but engage in the practice of writing. It can just be a simple blog post, but the practice has to begin. Dr. Leonardo Flores was here last day. He talks about digital writing. That is where it begins from. That to decontextualize electronic literature from just the practice of reading, but branch out into the practice of writing, expressing yourself using different forms of computation. It's not necessarily has to be AR or VR every single time. It can just be a simple blog post with a few pictures. That's where you can start. And then today in itself is the first day of the unconference, which is being led by the fantastic people, R. Lyle Skynes, Dina Larson, and Ken Alba. I have been very fortunate to know all of them personally. So I please implore you to check out the New Media Writing Prize and the Digital Literature for Social Good unconference. So the potential of electronic literature and digital storytelling is immense, because the academic chair R. Lyle Skynes herself has a work called UNCO2, which sees possibilities on how we can counter or we can teach people about environmental crises using digital storytelling. And it's a very powerful medium. We tried to workshop on it in Italy in Como a few months ago, but we couldn't. We had to do other things. It wasn't possible. Working with school students are not easy. Now, the ELO 2023 conference at Coimbra in Portugal is coming up. Last time it was at Como. I was very fortunate to be there. Now, there are possibilities that there might be bursaries this time for the virtual event only, not the membership, just for the registration, because exchange rates are costly. There might be bursaries, 1 or 2 at the most, not many. So not making false promises. The details have not been ironed out, so I cannot share the details concretely here in a public forum which is being recorded. But I can tell you that there will be 1 or 2 bursaries, mostly for people in disenfranchised conditions, whatever it may be, from Indian context. So please, if you're thinking of applying, the deadline is on the 20th. I know it's too late, but if you're thinking of applying, please do. Is ELO the best place to talk about electronic literature or digital literature? Perhaps not. But I know about this, and this is where we can make a start. For that matter, nothing is the best place. But you have to make your own best place as you go along. And I'm just sharing what I know with you, all of you. And finally, Electronic Literature India. I think I have posted 1 million times about joining Electronic Literature India, and I have bothered everyone in the chat by doing it. Once again, Electronic Literature, as you can see, it just exists on Twitter and on WhatsApp. It doesn't even have a website. And if you want to join our humble community, please write to me in my email. But it doesn't have a website. It doesn't have an active social media presence. And someone told me when I was talking about it, I am editing a special issue on electronic literature and digital humanities with Riam Hosni and Leah Hendrickson for reviews in digital humanities with Rupika Risam and Jennifer Giuliano. And someone told me in having these conversations that how can we accept Elit India as a project? Because it doesn't tweet much. There is no website. So a community is legitimized just by its infrastructural presences and certain metric that qualifies it to be a normative infrastructure. But I also don't mean to say that we shouldn't aspire for a website or we shouldn't aspire to have an active social media. Of course we have to, but we need people. We need you for it. There has to be more initiative for it. And that's why a conference like this is an absolutely amazing opportunity for all of us to come together and work for our common cause, advancing the cause that we have here. But we have to also get ourselves registered as a society. We can't just function out of the air. And it's now just a WhatsApp group. There has to be an archive, echoing Dr. Mukherjee's thoughts from an hour ago, perhaps. And there has to be festivals. Electronic literature is not just about academic discussions. It's also about exhibiting art. It's about celebrating art. And that is where I leave every one of you today. Not just read and critique, but also to celebrate art and digital literature, electronic literature, whatever you may want to call it. The mess of terminologies is a whole other paper in itself. I have a few acknowledgements to deliver before which I will end. Roderick Coover, I'm very grateful to him for his suggestions. Joseph Tabai for his suggestions as well. Dina Larson for her continued support. Without her support, I wouldn't have been able to attend the conference in person last yellow. I'm eternally grateful to her. And last but not the least, Dr. Simimori Doli for making us all come together. As Dr. Chakraborty said yesterday, getting the band back together. The band has to be disbanded, dismantled, and it has to be gotten back together again and again with new people, new initiatives, new energy. It has to be decentered, right? These are my socials. If I haven't talked about them 1,000 times already, please get in touch. I'm more than willing to engage with all of you. And last but not the least, you all have been breathtaking. Thank you so much for listening to me blabber for almost half an hour. Thank you so much. This is where I end.
Thank you, Samya Brata Roy. It's been a very interesting session, and I'm sure there are people who want to ask questions as well, because the comments say wonderful, amazing, incredible, etc. I'm sure there are clarifications that some people would want, and maybe comments on what our two young people had to present. So I'm going to ask Sango to please just moderate the questions, comments, and then we'll finish off.
Sango, are you doing it, or shall I do it? Because I'm the rapporteur,
actually,
it's my responsibility.
it's actually your responsibility. So please go ahead. Thank you.
Please introduce yourself, and then the questions, comments can come. So give me
Sure, ma'am. Sure, ma'am. Sure, ma'am. I'm Mohammed Aqib. I'm the rapporteur for this session. I'm also a PhD scholar at Department of English, Jamia. Yeah, so just before put across the questions, I wanted to ask if my voice is coming across well, because I had to rush to the nearest cafe because power is down, so there may be background noises.
It's quite all right.
Okay, thank you so much. Yeah, so this is so yeah, there are a lot of comments and there are appreciations. So this is the question, and I think this was addressed to Dr. Priya, and this question is from Vemini Shah. She says, "Thank you for the talk. I have a question. How different is wave from generation when we talk about Indian elite?"
I think wave and generation, they are used interchangeably. There is not much difference because wave and like there is a particular group of works which share the similarities in terms of narrative or in terms of the production, the materials used to produce. So we call them either as wave or generation. There is not much difference. If I'm not wrong, yeah, there
All
is
right.
no
Thank you.
difference. Yeah.
Thank you. So this question is from Sango Bidani, who's also moderating this session. He says, "Thank you for this eye-opening lecture. To overcome the challenge of insufficient advanced computer literacy, do you think that making these technologies more accessible will help encourage people to learn these techniques and promote digital literacy?" And I guess this Dr. Priya and Roy, Shamya Roy can both answer this question because it is not mentioned to whom it is addressed.
Samya, do you want to go or shall I go?
You can go first.
Yeah. I would think like just accessible is not sufficient. So unless how to use it, like there should be something like teach, like teaching is very important, like technical assistant. Even to read digital literature, you need digital literacy. Otherwise, it's very difficult to know where to go, how to navigate, where like which software they use to create. So actually, the narrative also varies based on the software or technology codes they use. So accessible also important, and then at the same time, teaching that technology is also important. Just not open access won't be sufficient.
Yeah, I totally agree. I totally agree with what Dr. Shanmuga Priya says. Yeah, awareness is more important.
Thank you to both of the speakers. So there's another question. Again, it is not mentioned to whom it is addressed. So any of you can take this. The question is from Zainab Abrar. And it is, what do you think about Chat GPT and other such AI that have the potential to wrest writing, both creative and critical, out of human hands? And what does the proliferation of such technologies say about the future of writing altogether?
Why don't you go first, Dr. Shanmuga Priya?
You go, Samya, you go first.
Okay. So I think that this is an interesting proposition, and I think that Chat GPT and AI are still at a very recent times in their it's in their infancy, and so are we in understanding about what role they can possibly play. But yeah, one of the main questions that have concerned us is that are students just going to use AI to submit their answers in class? That has been one of the fundamental conversations regarding ChatGPT. Is the academic essay going to die? Are students not going to cry 1 hour before their deadlines asking teachers to extend it? That has been the main conversation. So I think plagiarism checkers are going to get more and more advanced to detect if an AI tool has been used to do it. But as far as creative writing is concerned, I have seen that AI also, people use AI engines to create art, AI art. I have seen artists use AI art to create fantastic pieces. And I have seen the same discourse when people talk about graphic artists, like people who use iPad to create art, that it's not art. AI art is not art. According to them, only cave paintings are art, perhaps. Yeah, right. So I am not going into that kind of a debate that what is art or what is not art. But what I'm saying is that there will always be artists who will use these tools to add to their art, but not let their art be defined by it. Because it's not just art, but also the ideology behind it, right? So I think that will come across anyway, and it has the potential to be understood. But yes, as far as content writing is concerned, as far as cold emailing is concerned, which is a huge industry in itself, I think ChatGPT has a huge potential of encroaching on that kind of a space.
Thank you.
Maybe I would just add just add one point to that. Even like other coding systems that are before AI also part of the artistic production. So in that case, that also taking hand out of from the creative production hand from the human. So and if you also look at other like graphic design, that also part of the production that is done by coding before AI. So yeah, I agree with Samya in that case.
Thank you, ma'am. So here's the next question. This is from Jayanti. The question is, sir, and I think it's addressed to Mr. Shamya Roy. Sir, if all start writing and express their views, then there should be some software which monitors creativity and plagiarism check. What is your opinion on it?
I would ask a clarification that when you mean all start writing and expressing their views, what do you mean by all? Because one of the features of art that it should be accessible to everyone, that is something that we aspire for, that is something that we have been talking about. So when you say all start writing and expressing their views, what do you mean by all?
Well, I think we'll have to wait for that response to come, right? And I don't see any more questions here, but probably I think, I mean, it can be safely assumed that she's talking maybe about, the kind of binary that I guess yesterday Amira Hanafi was talking about, the binary between the binary of experts and participants when it comes to language usage. So maybe, I mean, just for the sake of an answer.
I think she has mentioned in the chat that those who don't have any passion but just to show off. I think these problems will always be there, because when Professor Flores was also talking about the generations of electronic literature and how some people had access to certain computing machines in the early days and they had the capability of playing around with it. Because even Dr. Mukherjee was talking about the other day about how he remembers computers only being used for work. And the fact that it can be used for something other than work was not even an imagination at that point, right? So I think it's a question of privilege, and that is something that we all have to live with.
Thank you, sir. I don't see any more questions. So if the chair permits, I mean, I can ask a question. I had one, or otherwise I can just pass it on to her to conclude the session.
No, please go ahead.
Thank you so much, ma'am. And my question is addressed to Dr. Priya. Since you were, talking about you talked about the waves and or generations of electronic literature in India. I just wanted to ask, since this the creation of electronic literature or digital art is at the intersection of creative processes and multimedia or the media technology that we have. So, to what extent does the homogenizing nature of this technology affect the particular creative processes which are peculiar to the let's say Indian society or Indian community?
I didn't get your question fully. You mean the technologies will homogenize? Like, I don't know how. Could you please give me some context for that?
Yeah, sure. For example, we often that quote is often mentioned that medium is the message, right? I can't recall the theorist, but
Yeah.
in that sense. So and if we go back to the works of Rupika Risam, right? She also mentioned how Indian literature is not getting that sort of visibility which the European or the Western literature gets, and is able to make use of the affordances of digital technology. And as also Mr. Roy was talking about the accessibility or the politics of accessibility. So my question is specifically about the the intersection of creative processes which are peculiar to India and this the technology, the digital technology or electronic literature.
Yeah, actually, I don't think so. It will homogenize like the entire process, because if we use our own, unique that whatever the materiality, like whatever will be using to produce that work. If you take some examples that were presented in the earlier plenary sessions, I think Siddharth presented about one work of Sultan's Dream, right? So that one, and also other works by the recent works by in the Indian electronic literature category of ELC, they all also used the same technology, right? So they use their own creative process technologies. Like in that case, like if even in the traditional writing, that is also homogeneous, right? It's just a matter of pen and paper or printing, but everyone uses their own creativity, right? So I don't think so that would homogenize. Technologies won't never, even the technologies, if you apply from the print technology, that 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 actually looks like the same kind of material, but each material carries a different set of ideas, concepts, creativity, right?
Thank you, ma'am. I'll absorb that and would get back to you if I have any further questions.
Okay.
Thank you so
Okay.
much.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, so I don't see any more questions here. I think I'll hand it over to Sango. Bye.
Actually, Amina would be the person who would be concluding the session. So I hand over the proceedings to Amina.
Okay, thank you, Sango. And it's been a very interesting session because it struck me that we had two presentations, one on the preaching side of Elit and the other on the practice of the practices involving Elit. And therefore, we've covered two major areas, which is, as we say, the theory and the text of it. So once again, I want to thank Priya for tracing the course of Elit in a sense, the history, if I may say, but the HIS of the word I will replace with HER. It was her story, looking at Elit. And it was interesting to see how she related the producer and receiver dynamics of Elit. On the other hand, we had Samya Brata, and it was very fascinating to hear him because he talked about accessibility, which is such a basic factor in terms of this entire area of Elit. And again, it was interesting, and I'm sure lots of people found it to be of practical use in the future because he talked about the experimental as well as the experiential aspect of this entire field. Just a couple of minutes to say goodbye to you. I must confess that I belong to the pre-digital era, where the study of literature meant handwritten notes, which evolved into stencils that we received, which evolved into photocopying, to scanning and downloading from the web, where we are today. And I know it's very boring when, due to online teaching and online exams, we got about 50 examination scripts beginning with the same language and paragraph and ending with the same thing. So that is the negative side of this entire business of the web access. But I see digitization still has a long way to go in India because we are a developing country and it has an elitist resonance. So somewhere the two have to meet, the necessity of it and the practical side of it. My own experience, which was many years back, is when I audited a US school where students were doing a geography lesson and the teacher was talking about what were the goods that were sold along this river, which I'm forgetting the name, which runs from New York towards central United States. And while she was talking, I noticed that most of the students they had their laptops. They were looking at each other's shoulders and saying, oh, which page is it? Oh, where is she? Which paragraph is this? So the result was that what she was saying, very fascinating information about barges that used to sail down the river, that was lost in trying to find the pages. So I do see that there are lots of hindrances, distractions in terms of this kind of technology. But we are all stakeholders in terms of creativity, because our basic craft in terms of our academics has to do with creativity of various forms. One thing which strikes me as to be addressed is what happens to voluminous creativity? Like say Vikram said, it's a suitable boy. What happens then? Or Eliot's The Wasteland. So we have to come to terms with that in terms of this platform. And I see the present generation, I'm not at all being critical, but it's the fast food generation. Everything has to come quickly. That is why it was mentioned that, it's time taking. Sometimes accessibility can take time. So that is one area which for me is of significance. Then there are hurdles of the economic kinds in countries like India. There are the hurdles of accessibility, which were mentioned so very well. And then there is basic facilitation that has to be offered from outside the person accessing Elit or whichever web source. Is it available? And again, when we look at developing countries, there's a long, long way to go. And branching out further, it just struck me that what about art? The art of the visual kind, especially painting or sketching, because you have to look at the texture, one has to look at the tone, the shade of color, etc., etc. How is the web going to manage it? So these are just things which struck me while I was listening to the two presenters, which was a very engaging time that I've had. But I will say that as far as my career is concerned, very soon it will be time to hand over the baton to younger folks. And I'm really happy that the younger folks have a way of entering into fields that now catch critics, students, scholars, and teachers. So thank you very much. It's been an engaging and a very fruitful kind of presentation. I do want to thank my colleague Shimi, and I'm not saying Dr. Shimi Doli Moni, because Shimi is more a friend, and I will place her as a colleague later. So I want to thank her for asking me to chair the session. I do want to thank Priya as well as Samya Brata. In the future, all the best in your careers. And to everyone who listened in, I'm sure you'll carry back something which will help you enter into the world of Elit. So all the best, and hope to see you in person next time when Shimi does something like this.
Thank you so much, Professor, for being such a lovely chair. Thank you so much.
Yeah, I agree, totally agree. Thank you so much. Thank you so much to everyone.
Thank you, Shanmuga. Thank you, Samya Brata and Samya Brata, Samya, because I'm also from Assam. Or let's say, yeah. And thank you so much, Amina ma'am, for this wonderful sharing. Without you, I don't think so anybody could have done a better job. Thank you so much.
Okay, so I'll say good morning to Priya and good afternoon to everyone else. Bye-bye.